All right, chapter 10 and a half. Keane and me, my first day outfit, boner issues, Squid in the Hinterlands, telling, a hint of backbone. Okay. A beautiful sunrise spread across Penn's Gap that day. The birds were chirping and a nice cool breeze cut through the air, hinting at fall. Had it not been for the screaming of 6 teenagers as they ran through the streets and the maniacal shouting of their horde of pursuers, the people of our town probably would have woken gently and pleasantly, rising from their beds in that comfortable and unhurried fashion perfect mornings facilitate. Actually, make that 5 screaming teenagers. Squid took off for the Hinterlands. It was a choice he would regret. What I didn't realize then, but do now, is that we were unknowingly reenacting a cross-country ritual stretching back to the ivied traditions of Exeter and Oxford, the finest prep schools in England where cross-country originated. The term harriers is often used for cross-country runners. Most people don't know why. It has to do with the hounds and the hares and the hunts involving them that took place over the Victorian-era English countryside. The first cross-country races often involved a group of hares who were sent out first, then were chased by a group of hounds. The hares left a paper trail behind them in good old sporting England, and they were certainly not in danger of being duct taped to trees or telephone poles, although the idea was generally the same. Whatever the history, none of us cared about it on that day. We were all fully in the present, trying to avoid the humiliation of being taped to a tree or a pole, and the later physical pain of losing large amounts of body hair when the tape eventually was ripped from our bodies. Popeye Leonardo Keane, my brother, and I flew down the tree-lined streets and ducked into the alleyways around the town square, hiding behind dumpsters and jumping backyard fences in hope of escape. Hyder vanished down an alley while Keane and I stuck together. We spent a solid 3 or 4 minutes on the courthouse lawn, dodging and weaving like tailbacks as the hawks and eagles laid a hand on us here and there, but couldn't quite latch on well enough to tackle us and then tape us to a bench or a signpost. Eventually we realized there were too many of them and that we were doomed to be caught if we stayed where we were, so we sprinted across the bridge over the river that ran through town and into the park where there were many restrooms and shelters to hide in. Strangely, that morning built my confidence in a way no other workout would have. That morning, I realized that Keane and I were truly faster than everyone else on the team, even Slade. They couldn't catch us. But we couldn't run all morning. We had to get back to the school in time for the bell. The trick was to find a place to hide so they might give up the chase and we could slink back to the school and shower and change. Time passed too quickly. Soon I knew my first impression as a high schooler, a grown-up, was going to be woefully inadequate, and nothing like the fine-tuned image of myself I'd worked so hard to create. "It's nearly 7, I remember Keane telling me as we walked alongside the fairway of the town's 9-hole public golf course, still at least a mile from school. Maybe we can sneak back in now. I think we both knew then that we'd be wearing our smelly running clothes all day. School began at 7:35. Even if we ran hard, straight back to the locker room, and miraculously avoided any upperclassmen, we'd barely have time to rinse the sweat off and change before the bell. "We've got to try it," I said. "We'll see if someone's guarding the locker room." Right after I said those words, I was sure somebody was guarding the locker room. I sighed. It was a grown-up sigh, a sigh of resignation. So maybe in some small way on that first day of high school I truly wasn't a child anymore. Resignation, it seems to me now, is the natural state of the adult human being. "We'll probably just have to go to class like this," I finally admitted to both Keane and myself. "It'll be better just to be on time than to be showered and dressed and 30 minutes late on the first day." We ran in silence, taking alleys and side streets. When we got outside the locker room, there were 2 seniors standing there like a pair of gargoyles. They both had rolls of duct tape in their hands. As we walked in through the main doors, dripping in sweat, stinking of BO, we attempted to blend in. It didn't work. An older girl with spiky black hair and 7 or 8 earrings in one ear laughed out loud at us. My running shorts never felt so tiny. I became hyper-aware of my penis. Paradoxically, just thinking of how embarrassing it would be to tin out my shorts in front of the whole school made the satiny smoothness of them suddenly very apparent. As I wove my way through my hundreds of classmates, I tucked myself into my waistband and hoped for the best. By midday, it seemed the entire school had our senior-led workout described to them. Instead of blending in, making a good impression, listening to my teachers and looking for some quality female prospects in each of my classes, I spent my entire first day of high school focusing on not getting an erection. This effort backfired completely. Never had I been more aware of my own genitals than on that day. I carried my new books at waist level and did not, under any circumstances, set them down if I was not safely seated in a chair under a desk. It was a transparent gesture, but it was the best I could do. I arrived at biology to discover Squid was in my class. It turned out he'd flunked freshman biology the year before and had to take it again. His first day of school attire also consisted of his running shorts, shoes, and a stinky t-shirt. His arms and legs, I saw, were streaked with broad red lines about the thickness of duct tape. Before class began, I pulled a chair up next to him. "What happened to you?" I whispered. "A farmer set me free around 9 o'clock, he said. He was gazing off into thin air. 9? Man, sighed Squid, his eyes unfocused, as if still in shock. I ran farther than I've ever run. I was way out there, like maybe 2 miles past that barn we hid in. His face remained blank as he told his tale. There were 4 of them that followed me. He finally made eye contact with me, and they just kept following me. It was like they could have caught me way before they did, but they just kept following me, like 20 feet behind me, just pushing me farther and farther out. He shook his head, and I just kept running. I didn't know what else to do. They said I needed to get more miles in so I could get that Porsche, and I just kept running. What happened when they caught you? I asked. I just fell on the ground, right in the middle of the road. I was like totally exhausted, so I just dropped. I refused to move. They stood around me for a few seconds, then they lifted me up and took me over to this telephone pole and taped me to it. It was surreal. I didn't fight at all. I could tell this last part confounded him. Man, I said, I didn't think they'd really do it. I'm not sure why I said that. I was certain from the moment I'd seen them with that tape in their hands that they'd use it if they got the chance. They did it, said Squid. Dude, about 20 people drove past me before that farmer stopped. He looked at me, his eyes wide. There was hurt and confusion in those eyes. At least 20 people live in this town who would let a kid stay taped to a telephone pole. I'm having a hard time with that right now. Are you going to tell your dad? I asked. And this question I see now was a telling one. I believed that people with money had power, even then, as a naive 14-year-old, and I'm still pretty sure that's accurate. When someone who has money has a problem, things get done. I was certain that Squid's dad once told of his being taped to a telephone pole and missing nearly half of his first day of school would raise hell. I envisioned suspensions from school, guys getting thrown off the team, maybe even coach getting fired. And when you've got that kind of power at your disposal, you use it, right? So I was pretty sure Squid would tell his dad what had happened. But he surprised me. Yes, he was rich, and yes, he was a whiner, and yes, he was lazy, but the kid did have a backbone. No way am I going to tell my dad, he said incredulously. What kind of weenie do you think he'd think I am if I did that? I know, it wasn't much. The kid didn't say he was going to get revenge on the guys who taped him. He didn't say he was going to slit their necks and shit down their throats. He didn't say he was going to show everyone by breaking 20 minutes and driving that Porsche or Land Rover over their dogs. He didn't even say he felt like he'd be a weenie if he told. He said his dad would see him that way. But he wasn't going to let his dad do that. He wasn't going to tell his dad that he was the only sophomore who got chased and that he was the only one of us who actually got caught and taped. It was more than I expected, and it created in me a hint of pride by association. I'd been debating whether or not to tell my own father. During the first period of school, I had envisioned my dad raging into the school, his face set in a scowl that would send the secretaries in the principal's office scurrying. I'd envisioned him making Coach cry and Coach getting fired. I'd wanted that badly while sitting in my first class, my bare legs cold, feeling naked. But now I wasn't so sure. At dinner that night, when Mom asked Hyder and me how our first day of school went, I decided to keep what had happened to myself. Hyder did too. It was a rare tacit agreement on our part. If someone else had spoke out, so be it, but it wasn't going to be me or my brother who blew the whistle on our hazing. It turned out nobody else on the team mentioned it either. We had a secret now, our whole team. Nothing creates bonds in people like shared secrets. Shared secrets and mutual suffering, the two greatest bonding experiences in life. This truth would be brought home to me that October morning in the wrestling room. But that first day of school, I'd lost what little faith I'd had in Coach, and it would get worse before it got better.